Hi Mike, nice to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you.
Nice to have a chat with you for Startup 2.0. It's very nice to have your time and your approach. Yeah.
Delighted.
So that we can have your impressions and your idea about Southern European startups.
Okay.
How do you think Southern European startups are working?
The interesting thing is the way that the Southern European scene is gradually starting to connect with the large European countries. I mean, you'll see now entrepreneurs from Spain and from other Southern European countries regularly at other European startup events, and also in the US as well. I think we can do more, definitely, and I think one of the ways that all European startups can connect better with the international scene is just being more visible.
Our level of English is maybe not as good as Northern European business ones.
I think there are two sides to this argument about internationalisation. And on the one side, those of us in Britain who hardly speak any languages at all, we're pretty useless, want everyone to speak English, blah blah blah. And we talk about internationalising in English and that kind of thing. And on the other side of the coin, in Spain, for instance, you have access to this huge market of Latin America, which is much more fitting often, and huge. I mean, incredibly big. And I mean, I would just say go in all directions, and it depends on what your company is doing. If you're aiming at a sort of a consumer-like play that really wants to be sort of big in Silicon Valley, then sure, you're going to have to be in English. If you're aiming at an emerging market in South America, then go ahead, go whatever language is most appropriate.
In TechRunch and in all tech media and blogs, we don't hear much about Southern European startups. Is there any reason why we don't talk much?
At TechRunch we've actually tried to do a lot of international coverage, quite a lot more than I would say a lot of our competitors, to be honest with you. Certainly I've had a good go at that myself. And if you look at something like amazing companies like Thon or 20 or 3Scale out of Barcelona, we've definitely covered those guys pretty well. The issue is not necessarily the fact that we don't want to cover these companies. We do, but you've got to kind of be as noisy as the other guys, so just expecting coverage doesn't necessarily make things happen. It's about getting out there, it's about being visible, it's about going to some of the big conferences and events, and just being out there, and doing whatever all the other guys do and badger the press, because that's what we're there for, to be badgered all the time. We take it on the chin, it's our job.
What does Europe need to become a Silicon Valley? Or what's more, do we really need to copy their system, or wouldn't it be better to create a new one, or establish more in keeping with our culture?
I think Europe doesn't need to copy Silicon Valley at all. There are things that we can take from Silicon Valley, like openness, sharing information, willingness to share, to help each other, not for money. I help you, I want some money. I mean, what's that about? Different in Europe, we can certainly draw on deep culture here. One of the interesting things about being in London is that it's becoming a kind of like the New York of Europe, and it's very much a melting pot. We have people here from Spain, Italy, Germany, France, all over the place in London, and you realise that actually a lot of the time they're doing startups based on very sort of interesting European cultural aspects, like our brilliance at art, fashion, design, music. And these are I mean, if you look at like Edited or Luke out of Vienna, or List, which is fashion, or Luster, new interior decor, MyDeco, Made.com, Songkick, Music Metrics, SoundCloud, music, art, fashion, culture, amazing stuff coming out of Europe right now in terms of technology companies. If there's one of the things that I think is very interesting about, say Southern European companies is how really often they are really good at social, because there's a real social culture. I mean, hanging out in the beautiful weather and socialising and using a mobile is just so natural. So I think there should be some powerhouse mobile companies coming out of these countries in the next few years, and I don't see why that wouldn't happen.
Talking about London Silicon Roundabout or Tech City, or like, do you really think it's gonna lure talent?
And I think that was a really great example of how organic clustering can really start to have a tangible effect on the technology ecosystem. Suddenly find it's easier to find other entrepreneurs who are doing similar things to you. You learn from each other. You can have lunch, coffee, learn from each other really quickly, easily, hire people more easily, those kinds of things. There was a government project called Tech City to basically shine a light on that. I mean, it's kind of like a big PR company, and a lot of people think that's wonderful, great, sure, shine a light. And I would encourage a lot of European countries all over the world to actually go, put your flag in the ground and go make a stand where you live, and get everybody together in the place where you live and cluster, and that's when things start to take off. And you can use that. The media loves these things.
Where you tech media sometimes put all your attentions in some startups and then just forget about them.
The way that technology hype happens is very much driven by the fact that English is an international language. Who speaks English most of all, apart from India, shall we say, is the Americans, and they have a cluster called Silicon Valley, which has been there for 50 years, and it's very, very big. Now, they now have hundreds of media outlets to write about the technology sector, and that has caused enormous amounts of hype. And of course, things like the Facebook valuation, the Zynga, LinkedIn, etc., have become a big deal. Now, how do we create that in Europe? Well, I'll tell you what. Ignore your local media, who are usually useless at covering technology, and start to embarrass them and tell them and tell the local politicians and the local media, you guys are missing out. You're missing out on all the amazing stuff that people in Spain are coming up with right now. If you want to talk about the hype around things like Pinterest and stuff like that, you've got to remember though, a lot of the time these things are driven by traction, so they wouldn't be getting the hype if they didn't get a lot of users. And that's particularly to do with how consumer web apps and consumer applications are geared towards trying to be as viral as possible to go, to get really big in 2 weeks' time, and that becomes a sort of it still remains a kind of an interesting art about how you do that, and the ways you do that.
Isn't it a bit excessive, like the interest startups show in appearing on your web?
I think it's obviously fair to say that over the last few years TechRunch has become a big media outlet for startups. That's absolutely true, and we will fight tooth and nail for all of the stories that head in our direction, of course. But I think it's one of the great things about 2012 right now is that there are now a proliferation of media outlets which are fighting for these stories, and it just makes companies like TechRunch fight harder, basically. So I think that if you're a startup and you're looking for media coverage, so you need to have a good product in the first place, and you also need to work out whether or not the media company that you're going to, whether it be TechRunch or GigaOM or whoever, is actually going to reach the audience you want to reach. So do you want to reach investors? Do you want to reach consumers? Do you have a very, very social app that's the sort of thing that Mashable would write about? Just one post on TechRunch is not going to make your company the most amazing thing since sliced bread. Of course, we would like to say that, but the reality is, it's going, it's probably going to help, but you've got to have a good product in the first place.
As a member of both public and private organizations, what's the difference in the way they work, in the way they see things?
We've had an initiative here called the Mayor's Digital Advisory Board, which I'm a member of, and really they became very interested in not only say putting Wi-Fi in the city and things like that, but also trying to support new startup businesses and work out, what their needs were, whether there was anything that local government could do. And that was actually useful, I think, to some extent, to have a conversation about what was feasible, what was possible, what the expectations were, instead of just ignoring each other. Just to maybe have a conversation about that, and that's been fruitful, I think. Don't wait for the night, the hero to come riding over the hill. It's really about making your own community start to work. There's usually somebody in the community, I know Alex Barrero, people like that, who basically go, right everybody, let's get together, let's have a demo night, let's talk about PHP, let's talk about Ruby on Rails, whatever. Let's get out there. Let's talk about startups, venture capital. Let's find who the hell are the angels, angel investors, right? Let's get this information out there. Let's start publishing it. Let's enliven our own scene, and let's not. Local government is always going to move incredibly slowly. And it's great to have a conversation with those guys, but if you really want to start up and you want to be an entrepreneur, you've got to make things happen for yourself and get your community going as well.
What would you set up now if you could start a startup?
Sounds like a kind of a hackneyed phrase, but maybe something to do with mobile, social and location, which I think remains very interesting, I think. Nobody's really cracked it. Some really interesting things to be doing in emerging markets like in Africa or South America. I think startups that concentrate on those really, really big emerging markets are going to be very successful because there's just not that many people paying attention. And if you look at the uptake of mobile in Africa, for instance, it's really through the roof.
Like in TechRunch, these months and weeks, there have been many movements, like staffs, directors, many people are talking about it, and people are saying you're gonna announce something, like, could you give us a teaser?
Really, I can't remember very much about how the media's operated over the last 20 years. I mean, I only turned 21 just the other day. I would say that a lot of the ructions and sort of movements and changes you see in technology blogging that have happened over the last month to a year are just signs of an emerging industry, and you see journalists come and go, you see writers come and go, and that's the media industry, and it's not really a big surprise that people come and go and do new things, and usually they often go and do something pretty cool. So which generally adds to what's going on rather than take something away. And the people who can continue to do whatever they're doing, in this day and age right now, I think everybody's just getting stronger, and I think we're looking at a sort of a scenario of a rising tide lifting all boats, really.
What's the secret for startups to make noise?
If you're a startup and you want to get lots of traction really quickly, you can do a couple of things. You can basically create a great product which people want to share, normal people want to share. And don't think about trying to change user behavior. Don't think about trying to change how humans think. Think about how humans think and then adapt and create something that they want to share. That's an obvious answer. If you want to talk about dealing with the media, then you can go to my personal blog, which is mbites.com, and I've got a PowerPoint and a video on there which explains to you how the technology media operates, especially bloggers. And I always say to people, if you want to explain to the media how you work, put yourself in context. Are you the YouTube for radio, or what are you? In one sentence, get your startup down to one sentence, and use that. And also just be different, stand out from the crowd, do something interesting, keep it short, keep it sweet, get to the point, stand out from the crowd.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, my pleasure.